Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Anshula, and today we're going to be doing a bit of a recent reads and book shopping vlog. Last week we visited Bishop Art District, which is a hub of independent shops and restaurants in Dallas. It's a neighborhood that I absolutely love, and it's crazy to think about the fact that the last time I visited prior to this last week visit was 2 years ago. We went to Doozy Chocolate, which is Catherine Clapner's hub of chocolate, and if you've never tried her albatross fudge, I highly recommend that because it is so good. Her flavors are crazy and unique, but they just work. And we also tried a Korean soul food restaurant. I love that. It's so clever. And it was a new hot pot restaurant that I really enjoyed. Bishop Art District today felt completely familiar, but also completely new. There were old favorites, but also these new concept stores that I was so excited to explore. Two bookstores that are really close to each other. One is one that I visited many times before and is one of my favorite local bookstores in Dallas, but the other one was a new addition that silently crept into the Dallas bookstore scene in 2020.
Hey darling, we could get out of town, see the beautiful world around, wanna see it now. Pack our bags and get in that car, leave a little note and we'll drive real far. Let's get out, we can leave this city. Let's drive to the open air. We can look back someday. Baby, don't you understand that we only get one life? I wanna make it count, honey. Come on now and take my hand.
Poets Oak Cliff is a small, one-room, largely poetry-focused bookshop. I absolutely loved it. The bookshop is owned by modern-day poet Marco Cavazos. I originally visited this bookstore because I was looking for one poetry book in particular that I've had so much trouble trying to find. I was searching in Barnes & Noble just a couple weeks ago, and I have been really wanting to find this book, and this is My Brother Was an Aztec by Natalie Diaz. Natalie Diaz is one of the most talented writers of the 21st century. Her writing is an absolute gift. My Brother Was an Aztec centers around meth addiction, family pain, and the complex labyrinth of Native American culture. Diaz swipes humor into her book, lightening but in no way taking away from its heavy message. It's a dark book, painful too, but one of my absolute favorite poetry collections, and I highly recommend this book. This book was out of stock at Poets Oak Cliff. I understand why. They said they let me know when it comes back into stock, so I will definitely be revisiting this bookstore, but I do want to mention a couple things about this bookstore. When I walked in, I was expecting them to only carry poetry books, but that is not the case. There were these really stunning classics editions of individual short stories like The Bear by William Faulkner. That's the only one of the set that I had read. There were these stunning hand-bound journals. Right at the entrance was a table with an old school typewriter with the signed poetry by Marco Cavazos himself. They carry a lot of translated books. They have a lot of variety when it comes to finding authors from all over the world. In fact, I came in with the intention of getting My Brother Was an Aztec, and I told myself I wouldn't get any other book apart from that, but I wanted to support them in some way, like at that moment. So I purchased a book called Suslov's Daughter. At its core, Suslov's Daughter is a depiction of growing up in Yemen, and it has this huge focus on Yemeni history, which I loved. I loved the way the history was explained in this book. It has this niche focus on Aden, which is a port city in Yemen. As much as I loved the way that the history was explored in this novel, this book was not for me. I found the depiction of female characters in this book extremely disturbing. They were very flat characters. They were fetishized by the narrator in a way that was very much to do with their ethnic appearance. I don't know if at the end of the book his mindset shifts. I felt like the female characters didn't have any personality traits. They were just a part of the story meant to progress the story, but nothing more than that. The way the narrator interacted with the female characters and the role that they played in the story, they just reminded me of a sidewalk. That's not the depiction that I wanted in my head, so that's another reason why I DNF'd this book. That being said, I love the bookstore that I picked it up from, and I'm not sure because I've not read the author's other works if that's a common theme in his other books. I do know this was longlisted for an Arab Fiction Award. Based on that, it might be by the end of the book it changes. It was just disturbing enough to the point that I read. I realized that this book was not going to be for me, and it was not going to be something that I wanted to continue forward. I originally picked up this book because I wanted to read a book by a Yemeni author. So a while ago, I read the Monk of Mokha by Dave Eggers, which is a rags to riches story about a Yemeni American American man that's rooted in coffee culture, and I really enjoyed that, but I wanted to read about Yemenchu more of an own voices perspective. If you have any recommendations for books by Yemeni authors or Arab authors, I would love to know them. Leave them in the comments down below because that's something that I have been looking for and I really want to find. This book personally was not for me, but I know there are going to be lots of books out there that I'm really going to enjoy. The next bookstore that we visited was Wild Detectives in Dallas.
Everything comes back in the blink of an eye. They skip the small talk, cause you know me better than I know myself. Oh, might's been a while now since I saw you, but it feels like yesterday somehow. Time has stopped, nothing's changed, we're the same. And we skip the small talk, cause you know me, yeah, you know me like nobody else.
Wild Detectives is a well-loved bookstore in DFW. It is a bookstore bar. If you go in the early afternoon, there's plenty of open study areas and room to poke around and explore all of the books that are in this bookstore bar. And they also have these punny, drunk pickup lines that are book-related on display that I think are so cute, and they keep them on this wall right across from the bar counter. There's something really homey about the interior of this bookstore with its wooden walls and soft lights. It just feels like a house, which I really love. That's the thing about a lot of the shops in Bishop Arts District. They do look like houses, which I think adds to the cozy neighborhood ambiance. In Wild Detectives, you'll find modern poetry collections, but you also find the Penguin Drop Caps Classics editions. While these look stunning, they're really more shelf pieces because the binding does come undone quite easily. They also have some new and noteworthy nonfiction titles on display as well. I did pick up a book. Where did the book go? The book that I got was Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu. I love this book so much. In fact, this morning I was having this huge conversation with my mom about some of the discussions that were presented in this book. I just feel like there's so much to talk about. This book is a character study of Willis Wu, who is an Asian American. It's a satire about Hollywood's depiction of Asian characters. I think this book was so powerful. It breaks so many laws in terms of its storytelling. It is written in a sort of screenplay, but sometimes it feels more like poetry, sometimes it feels more like a novel. Some of the dialogue is told in screenplay format. It added so much to the dialogue. I cannot recommend this book enough. The main character, Willis Wu, is a bit player in a show called Black and White, which is Law and Order-esque. He dreams of being a kung fu guy, but he's just playing a generic Asian man. This book tackles so many different things, and I love the way Charles Yu approached this conversation. At first, it was subtle, and I think the thing about this book that I love so much is when you enter the story, it feels almost like a daze. It's this story about a story that feels a little Inception-y, and it's so representative of the Asian American perspective that it's this in-between world, and he really captured that with his writing. This book talks about assimilation and immigration. It also tackles things like the model minority myth. It discusses the expectation in Hollywood to have accents. Asian people aren't a monolithic group of people, and I think that this really explores that in a way that's really well done and incredibly witty. It also made me reflect on my own experiences. I absolutely loved it. I highly recommend it. And I definitely didn't understand all of the cultural things in this book because it's very, very nuanced and it's written for a very specific audience, but it's also written in a way that's accessible to everybody because the point that the author is trying to make, he does it in a way that's very, very blunt. I enjoyed the more subtle parts of the book, but at times he is very blunt with, this is the message that I want to get across. And I appreciated that. The ending of the book was very much in your face, but I also found it to be very climactic and it built up. It felt like it worked for the type of story that this was. It had a lot of humor and wit, and it was told in a little bit of a dry tone at times, but I still found it incredibly moving. I think this is going to be one of my favorite books of 2021, and it was a National Book Award winner in 2020, and I can see why, because it was so creative. The way the story was told was just very easy to get into. It's very fast-paced, even though it's a character study, and I highly recommend this one. Those are the books that I picked up while in Dallas, and if you have any more bookstore or book recommendations, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Bye guys!